I'm just gonna give them something to trim. So I'm just gonna like take, I was already doing that, but then I realized that I didn't mention that. And so, yeah, I'm just gonna give us a few seconds of weird Zoom looks and then I'll start. Okay. Hi, my name is Julian Carrington, and I'm a programmer with Planet in Focus. I'm delighted to be joined for this industry conference session by the very talented team behind The Last of the Right Whales. The film is very fresh from its world premiere at the Calgary International Film Festival, and we're hugely excited to have the chance to screen the film as our closing night presentation on Sunday, October 24th. If you're in Ontario, you can tune in to that at 7 p.m. Before we get to that event, however, I'm really looking forward to diving into the film's innovative impact campaign. And this is an impact case study. To share some behind the scenes insights, it's a pleasure to welcome the film's producer-director, Nadine Pequeneza, its executive producer and impact producer, Joanne Jackson, and also sharing impact producing responsibilities, we have Shole Elemi Fabry. And representing one of the key supporters of the film, we have Pat Zat, who is a director of the International Fund for Animal Welfare. A big thanks to each of you for being with us.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Good morning.
In a moment, I will invite each of you to elaborate a little bit on your roles in developing and executing the project's impact campaign. But before that, I'd like to set the film up a little bit for our audience. So Last of the Right Whales is a story of the efforts to conserve the endangered North Atlantic right whale, which in recent years have been dying faster than they can reproduce. As the film shows with some really quite dramatic footage, their decline is directly attributable to human interference, both in the forms of boat strikes and from entanglement in fishing gear. And climate change certainly is only exacerbating the issue as it drives the whales further into harm's way as they pursue shifting feeding grounds. So we have a trailer that showcases that really remarkable footage that you were able to capture, and I'd love to go ahead and roll that now.
It's not the well-known whale. It's not the whale of Moby Dick, and it's not the humpback whale.
We have a very limited view on right whales. They're so rare, we don't understand them. And their decline tells us what is happening to this ocean.
1, then 2, then 6 dead whales, and the death count hasn't stopped.
With only hundreds left in existence, they've suffered a terrible blow.
We're at a crisis moment here.
The baseline of this ecosystem is changing. If the whales lose the plankton, they're dead.
So we're trying to look for layers of food to explain why the whale is feeding right close to the surface.
2 meters!
The real culprit in this is rope.
Once you have a vertical line and a whale in the same area, there's a risk.
So those are previous entanglement scars, previous boat strike scar.
And so we're causing all this. So we have to do something. If this happened to a human, what would we do?
Oh my goodness! Stop right here, there's one right next to us. This is the sort of stuff I live for.
How lucky are we, guys?
How important are these animals to us? That's really what this comes down to.
Oh my God. Doesn't get much closer than that, eh? This is one of the greatest animal ethical issues of our time.
We should leave no trace, and the traces that we do leave should be good ones.
Give nature a chance and it'll come right back.
That's what we're asking for, is to give the right whale a chance to show what it's made of.
So again, we very much encourage anybody watching this session in Ontario to tune in on October 24th for our closing night presentation. But if you're not in Ontario, you can look out for the film at festivals and in theaters across Canada over the coming months. I think one of the things that really comes through in that trailer is a sense of the urgency of the issue. And Nadine and team, I know it's very much your hope that this film can play a role in helping to reduce the harmful impacts that humans are having on right whale populations. Perhaps we can begin by giving you each the chance to expand a little bit about or on your roles in working towards that goal. Nadine, I'll start with you. Obviously, you're the producer and the director of the film, but I know you've always conceived of your involvement as going beyond simply bringing the story to the screen. How are you now involved in trying to achieve the film's impact goals?
Well, you're right, Julian. I mean, that was really the impetus for the film, were the deaths that occurred in 2017. You know, we lost 12 North Atlantic right whales in Canadian waters that year, and 17 total. And, you know, when you're dealing with a population that's less than 400, they estimate around 360 existing right now. When you're dealing with those kinds of numbers, it is urgent. And so when I started to research the story, I found organizations like IFAW, which Pat is here representing today, but also the Canadian Whale Institute, the Canadian Wildlife Federation, you know, Oceans North. There were a number of organizations that were really focused on this issue. And so I saw an opportunity to make a film that could play a role in helping them achieve their goals around protections for the whales. Because when you start to research, you see that it's preventable. These deaths are preventable. And so that was really what pushed me toward this film. And then my role now is overseeing the campaign. So the campaign's being run through Hit Play Production. So I'm the contractual the person responsible for all of the financing and the legal contracts with our partners, and then also putting the team together. And so that's Joanne and Cholet, who you'll meet shortly, but they both came on during production. So it's great to have people on the impact team who actually are so familiar with the subject matter and the issues and all of the stakeholders that it makes the transition into the impact campaign quite seamless.
Wonderful. Joanne, I'll come to you next. I know that you're at this point quite a seasoned producer in the impact space. What is your involvement with this film's impact campaign?
Well, I worked with Nadine on the film, which was really fantastic to get to know the subject matter. And I'm the lead partner relations person, and I'm overseeing all the outreach and community screenings aspect of this as well. So some people may know my previous films, The Messenger and The Woman Who Loves Giraffes. So both of those films were very much wildlife and conservation focused as well. So I do have some experience in this space, and I was really fortunate to go to the Jackson Wild Summit in 2019, where there was an oceans focus, and Nadine and I had already started working together at that point. So, and she had a little bit of demo footage. So I was able to start to talk to partners. And that's where I first met IFAW. So, you know, my role is to work with our partners and work with them on their goals so that the impact campaign, which is funded totally separately from the film, helps move the needle on this conservation issue.
Awesome. Cholet, I know you're a little bit newer to impact work, but evidently from our prior conversation, I can tell that you're a quick study. What's it been like to jump into impact work on a project like this?
It's been really eye-opening and very exciting. So I do come from a different space. Nadine and I had actually worked together 15, 16 years ago on a doc series, and we had reconnected last year, and she mentioned to me about this project she was working on and suggested that impact producing might be something I should think about moving into. So before this, in my previous life, I was the executive producer of ET Canada, which when you're moving from entertainment into doc space isn't always a natural connection for people. But I really think the fact that I come from a space of how do we engage audiences? How do we connect with them? How do we find them where they are and bring them into our space has been really helpful. And that's really what I've been focusing on a lot with the impact campaign. So I've been working with a digital strategist to create our digital strategy, even in production. We didn't just wait until the impact campaign came on. But then we've also been doing a lot of work with different stakeholders and with our different groups. And I'll be working more on the study guide, the discussion guide. And again, it's about engaging audience. That's really where I'm most excited about working in this space.
Very, very cool. Finally, Pat, I know you're obviously a veteran campaigner in the animal welfare space, but I'm not sure how extensively you've worked with filmmakers in the past. How are you involved in supporting the impact efforts of the project?
Yeah, so the International Fund for Animal Welfare is obviously very interested in storytelling and using storytelling because it's a very compelling way to tell the story of what's happening to whales in our oceans. And so when we had this opportunity, pardon me, to leverage the beautiful imagery and the storytelling that Nadine was able to capture, it was just, for us, it made sense to figure out how could we work with them to make sure that people after they've seen the film, that they had a place to go to find out more information. What can I do to help? And so while in the past we have worked on impact campaigns for another documentary that was released years ago called Sonic Seas in the US with NRDC, we haven't done this same kind of work in Canada. So I'm very excited to see how we can both promote this film in Canada, bring people to a place where they can understand, well, what can I do next now? And also be able to help support the film being also screened in the United States. So we also have an office in the US. So that's why it's very interesting for us to be able to partner on this impact campaign.
Well, yeah, it's wonderful to have you involved. Nadine, maybe we can touch on, I know that actually in your comments previously, you did talk a little bit about how the film and the impact campaign were very much sort of springing from the same impetus for you. But maybe I can ask you to expand on that a little bit. How does your impact campaign for this film sort of relate to your overall goal in making the film, and maybe how does it differ from some of the previous impact campaigns you've been involved with? I know that this is a campaign that you very much conceived of sort of from the start. So rather than it being something that happens once the film is complete, it has been very much a parallel process of working towards impact as the film has been coming together.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is the third impact campaign that I've done with my films. And I have to say that with each of them, it's conceived of during production. And it really has to be successful early on. But I would say what's different about this campaign, and maybe I should just give a brief overview of what the campaign activities are.
Mm-hmm.
So, with any impact campaign, you do the normal release. So festivals, theatrical, if you have the opportunity for that window, and then community screenings. So you really want to target the audience that you're trying to influence or engage with the film. And so we're doing all of that with this, but specific to this campaign, we're looking at doing a community coastal screening tour that follows the whale migration from Florida up to the Gulf of St. Lawrence. So we really wanted to time it with the presence of the whales so that when we're engaging people, there's something happening, it's timely in a way. and really coastal communities because they have the connection to the whales, whether they're recreational boaters or fishers or even fishing communities, because so often the entire community is supported by the fishing industry, often in these smaller coastal towns. And so that's one of the activities. And the other one is, we want to target specific boaters. So during the time that we were filming this, 3 calves died. And it's because they were hit by smaller boats, which are often small recreational yachts or fishing boats. And there's not a lot of awareness in those communities about the presence of these mother-calf pairs during certain times of the season. So we're really looking at trying to find those audiences to raise awareness and also give them the information that they need to be able to avoid or prevent those deaths. And then, of course, there's a campus tour that we're doing that we're working very closely with our partners to organize, the study guide that Cholet mentioned. And then, of course, the whole digital strategy. And the piece that we've just put together is an email campaign, which we'll be launching soon. So that's very advocacy centered. We want to get to our governments because they're the ones who regulate these issues. When you have a species that is critically endangered, it's their responsibility to protect those animals. And so those are sort of the pieces of the campaign. And so for us, it's been a year-long process of working with our partners, bringing different partners on board and trying to figure out those pieces. So it's been very much a process, an iterative process going back and forth with our partners. And I don't know if I wandered off course there, Julian, but maybe you want to reel me back in.
No. I think it is certainly helpful to have a clear sense of sort of the core activities around which the campaign is being structured. How did you go about putting together your team? Once you were sort of conceiving that the impact would be central to the project, how did you decide who you would bring aboard to help you in that process?
Yeah, well, Joanne was my first victim. So because we've worked together before, but also because she's done 2 fabulous wildlife films. This is my first film in the natural history space. So I really wanted Joanne on board to help me with that. She did great theatrical releases with her 2 films, The Woman Who Loves Giraffes and The Messenger. And so I really saw that she was an expert in that area. And so I wanted that support. And luckily she took it on. And then Cholet, because of our experience having worked together before, we had a very good experience a number of years ago working on that series that she mentioned for TVO. But what Cholet brings to our team that none of us had is that real experience with branding and digital marketing and reaching out to audiences and organizing that whole strategy and the entertainment world. I mean, she knows a section of this which as documentary filmmakers we're not as familiar with. And so I thought those 2 were key to have on the team. And then from there, the 3 of us built, we brought on a social media strategist who works very closely with Cholet and a screenings coordinator who's just joined us and is working very closely with Joanne to organize all these community and coastal screenings and campus tours that we talked about, VIP screenings for our outreach partners. So that's the core of our team. Oh, and I should, of course, say our publicist, which is Taro PR. And so the publicist, all filmmakers are familiar with that. We have it in our budgets. It's part of our marketing budget. So that's core to both an impact campaign and also the marketing of the film. But it was interesting to work with Taro because they haven't done this kind of marketing before. So we've had some really good meetings around how you strategize a little bit differently to get the kind of media coverage you want for these types of impact and community screenings.
I'd like to come to Joanne and Cholet and Pat in a moment to talk more about their specific areas of expertise here, but I'm curious, you talked about budgeting there. My understanding is that you had a separate budget that you put together for the impact work on this project. How did you go about sort of designing that and identifying how you could build a budget for that within the sort of existing or alongside the sort of existing funding structures that are more focused on production here in Canada?
Yeah. Well, Canadian producers will know that our marketing budgets are capped, at 5% within our budget. So it does have to be outside of that. So we created a separate budget, the campaigns being run through Hit Play, so the parent company, not the sole purpose company. And early on, Joanne and I sat down and looked at what we thought we would need. So all of those team members, we talked about what is the length of the campaign going to be. So we're at 10 months. Originally, we had hoped for 12, but we had to scale back because of the amount of money we were able to raise. And then what are the activities that you want to fund? So you need to figure all of that out before you can start budgeting. And then we look to the partners. NGOs typically don't have money to support these kinds of campaigns. The budgets they do have are spoken for. So we were looking at a combination of maybe some in-kind services, maybe a small donation, or it could be a contract for service from an NGO. But our key strategy was to look to the NGOs to make introductions for us to foundations, because those are the funders who are able to support these kinds of campaigns. Because when you're looking at putting together a year-long campaign with a 5-person staff, it costs money, and to organize these community screenings, it's expensive. You need marketing, you need people on the ground. There's print traffic, there's all those costs. So it's a whole other production.
Mm. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, so Joanne, it sounds like you were key to helping to find those partners in building that budget. How did you go about identifying the partners that you thought you might be able to work with here?
Well, the first strategy is research, of course. The same as researching a film, you have to research who's working in the space of take action in these areas, who already has conservation campaigns going on, and then which organizations really want to make a difference, and how amenable are they to working with other partners too. That was a consideration. So, we talked to a number, but IFA was the first one to come on board. They were really, really keen to do this, I think, because of their experience with Sonic Sea. And I met a Canadian campaigner, Cheryl Fink, at Jackson Wild, and she brought a round table of IFA executives, US and Canadian, together there before I left. And then they were the first ones to sign with us, and they've been really instrumental in helping us define things. Then we approached the Canadian Wildlife Federation because they were doing a lot of work with North Atlantic right whales. They introduced us to a foundation that could bring some money into the campaign, which was fantastic. Then we brought the Canadian Whale Institute on board. They have one of the lead scientists working in the right whale space in North America, Dr. Moira Brown, and they are a very small NGO. They don't have a lot of resources, but we worked with them. We did a private fundraiser with them that was kind of it was hosted by a philanthropist that was very interested in this, and we did it virtually. In the past, you might have had a dinner party and had invited people that you thought might donate to the campaign, but we did it as a virtual salon, and it happened to be on this philanthropist's birthday. So her family and friends came on board, and it was a really wonderful fundraising event. And so Canadian Whale Institute came on board that way, which has been fantastic. Oceans North is also working in this space. They came on board in a less active capacity, but they're really interested in what we're doing. And then finally, Sierra Club Canada Foundation. They were the only ones that got to see a rough cut of the film. Everyone else came on board based on the experience of the team, what we were able to show them in terms of a few demo clips, and knowing the scientists, knowing Nadine's work, knowing my work. There was a lot of trust, I think, at that point, but they also all understood, I think, and Pat, you can verify this, that we can make a bigger difference working together than alone or working in our own silos. And I think that's been the most incredible part about bringing these partners together. And I hope I answered your question there too.
Yeah, did you want to speak to that?
Yeah, I think what was interesting about when we first heard about this opportunity was just the number of different people that Nadine had already knew that they were going to have included in the film. So once we saw, okay, clearly we know that the people who are at the front lines who are trying to protect right whales are featured in this film, then we trusted that while we weren't necessarily going to influence the documentary itself, that is not our role. Our role was to be able to use the documentary to start the conversation about how to protect right whales. And I would agree with Joanne that the value of convening NGOs together is very powerful, because each NGO has their own niche, their own approach, and their own where they're geographically located. And so being able to leverage those supporters, right, and being able to bring those people to see the film. So for us, being able to host a screening with some key decision makers is really important. Like being able to have that opportunity to do that, to convene a panel, to be able to have conversations about, well, what regulatory changes need to happen in order for us not only to stop right whales from dying, but to put them onto the path for recovery. That's what we're really looking at, right? First, stopping, mitigating those ship strikes and entanglements, and moving forward to making sure that more right whale calves are born every year, that where they're navigating across, along the seaboard is protected for them. So for us, being able to do that with a group of other NGOs and bringing that expertise together and ensuring that what we're asking people to do is meaningful and will actually have impact can only be done, I think, when you bring a group of people together and say, okay, really, from your collective expertise. Moira Brown is someone that was mentioned. She's been working in this space for so many years. We have had conversations over the years about what do we do, what's happening. And so I very much value all the partners and their expertise, and just being able to convene those together for the Impact campaign has been a real honor for me to be able to be a part of that journey.
Well, speaking of partners, actually, maybe for Joanne or Nadine, it might be useful to distinguish or ask about the overlap, if there is overlap, between the partners who were able to support the project in providing funding to build out the Impact campaign, and then the partners that you're working with in the course of the Impact campaign to amplify the film. Are those two distinct groups? Are those two different sets of partners, or are there entities that in effect do both?
Well, they are the same partners right now, but we're at the stage where we can work with local partners now and regional partners that have interest in this. So we'll be able to work with local conservation groups to host community screenings and have panel discussions. We'll be able to work with local marine mammal experts, have them on our panels, so that, you know, they're not necessarily in the film, but they're very involved with the issue. And I think that's really important, because the film speaks to the good work that a lot of them are doing. And the people who are featured in the film are just examples of people who are working in this area. Nadine picked wonderful characters for the film that all have an important role. And maybe you can speak to that, but it's they're not going to be able to go out and speak to everyone across the country when this film rolls out. So it's really important for us to work with the local partners too.
And I would just add to that, Julian, that when we conceived of the plan, we looked at partners at different levels. So the partners we've been working with for the past year, there's 5, and Sierra was the last to join, as Joanne mentioned. They've been working with us to develop the campaign, you know, so what are the activities? What are the goals? How are we going to measure that impact? What do we want to achieve at the end of this year? And then the other partners that we're hoping to bring on, because we're doing a big screening at the consortium every year, everybody involved, every stakeholder, fishers, governments, NGOs, scientists, they all get together and share their research and what they're doing. And so that's taking place actually this month. And so we'll be showing the film there, and we're hoping to bring on a number of other partners to get those local partners that Joanne was talking about. So what we call our gold partners are the ones that we've been working with for the past year. They're the ones who have invested time and money or connections, helping us to raise money into the campaign. And then we hope to bring on, you know, dozens more local partners who may not have a financial contribution to make, but can host a screening. So in that way, they might spend a small amount of money, but more it's about resources. It's about helping us to organize those campaigns on the ground, get the right people to see the film, and then to share whatever impact, take action message we might have, the email campaign being the first one that we'll come out with.
And very important on social media to have all these partners following us, sharing our digital assets. And we haven't really talked about that yet, but that's a really important part of the campaign and what Cholet's been involved with. And it really, I mean, there's great content that's going out through social media, and maybe Cholet wants to talk about that a little bit, but it's helping to educate and raise awareness of this, as well as put a smile on people's faces sometimes. So
yeah, I do want to make sure that we save plenty of time to talk about the digital strategy. Maybe before we do that, just while we're speaking about partners, I'd love to dive a little bit deeper, and then we can get into some of the meat of the digital campaign, and we'll share some of the assets as well that you have been creating for it, which are really great. But on partners for a moment more, what does it mean, or what's involved with signing a partner? How does that process work?
Well, we set 3 levels of supporters for the campaign. So we have a gold, silver, and a supporter level. And the gold partners, they were offered a package where they would be very involved in the outreach, and they could provide quotes for the film marketing materials and the website. They get to join in on the discussion regarding the screening toolkit and the discussion guide, educational guides. They did get, a logo acknowledgement as a partner in the credits of the film, not as a funder, but as an impact partner. You know, they're going to get tickets to special screenings, premiere screenings, and also, we're working with them to engage their community in special events prior to the community screening rollout of the film. So we're working with our partners to do these very special things for them. And they'll have access to all our digital assets as well, to be able to use them in their own promotion for campaigns. They'll be involved in the screening Q&As, discussion panels, and they will be involved as partners on the coastal tour as well.
Can I jump in? I'll just add on our end what that looked like for finding partners. And I know I came into it late, but we were still looking for partners when I joined the team at the beginning of this year. And so we were constantly creating and updating decks to present. Joanna and I did a number of virtual presentations where we were explaining to people, this is the project we're working on. We're very much solutions based. We want to find partners who have the similar mindset, but we were also doing it during COVID. A lot of these groups right now, as eager and excited as they were for the project, it didn't always work because it's a tough time for people to have extra funds or the connections or whatever it was. But what we were able to do, I think, is build a lot of interest, get excitement, and we were able to find new partners. Sierra Club came on in August. So that was pretty late. And we, like Joanne said, we're able to show them more of the film. But it's been a constant pitch. We're still talking to potential partners because there's still opportunity. The campaign is in motion. That doesn't mean we can't find people to work with still.
Actually, I think, Shirley, that's a really interesting point. I think people are familiar with the importance of public-facing materials, sort of well-designed infographics, tools that can communicate your impact goals and raise awareness to folks on social media or your sort of end audience. But how important is it to have materials, as you were just alluding to, decks, pitch decks, that sort of a thing, that can convey your aims to potential partners? Can you speak a little bit about that process and those materials and what kinds of materials you had to create?
Yeah, we had a few sort of intro materials. So it would be like, here's a synopsis and here's kind of a 2-pager just to give you a sense of what the campaign looks like. Who are our partners? Who are we broadcasting on? Where are you going to be able to see this film? All of those things, just to kind of whet their appetite and get them, interested enough to jump on a call and have a conversation with us. So we would do that. We also brought in a designer to help to make it look more professional. If we're asking people for a substantial sum of money, they want to know, and we want to present in a way that kind of is elevated, which I think was important. And visually, I think it made a difference. And then we would have decks, and Joanne and I would have variations. So we would have a longer one if it felt like we were moving into a position where they really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts. And then we had a bit more of a top line. And that was based on a simple slideshow kind of look, but we were able to highlight again who our partners were, where you were going to see it, and what the focus was for the outreach. And so I think visually it always helps people to see stuff, and also not overwhelm them with content, because as the impact campaign team, we know a lot of information and we want to share everything, but when you're coming on board, it can feel like too much. So there's a lot of editing. Nadine is very good at editing and making sure that we're not, sending out too much information, but you need that. You need different eyeballs and different skill sets and different insights so that we are presenting as solid of a package as possible. And then it would grow, it helped. We'll talk a little bit about this, but we launched our online campaign in June when we were still in production on World Oceans Day. So then we could also talk to people and say, well, you can see some of the stuff we're doing online. So now it gave people another place to interact with us and follow us and see, just have an overview of what we're doing publicly. So there were all these elements that were working together that we were putting together in the back end.
And I just throw in there, those pitch decks, there were several different versions, right? Depending on who the audience was. So a different one for an NGO, a different one for a foundation, a different one if there was a specific government fund that we were going after, because there were a couple, one in the States, one with DFO, another one with Ontario Creates. And then also influencers, you know, Cholet comes from the entertainment industry. We're looking to try and bring influencers on to support the film to help spread the message. So yeah, so there's a lot of work going into decks.
And if I can just jump in on that, as being obviously someone who received one of those decks, I can say that, you know, the level of care that went into preparing those was obvious. And I think it's beyond just having a good deck. It's also about having the people who are willing to have the conversations. And Joanne and Nadine were willing to have those conversations. If I, you know, convening people within the organization to have another conversation, they were very open to that. Like, okay, sure, do you want to jump on a call? So I think it's very iterative. So, you know, it's building a relationship, and it's about having those conversations and sharing assets when you have them. Nadine, when she came back from filming, you know, some of us who were kind of earlier on signing on, we were able to get a sneak peek at some of the imagery. You know, it's like, wow, you know, this is incredible. Because the thing about right whales is that they are very elusive. It is hard to get any imagery of them. It's one of the things as an organization we've struggled with. It's like, how do you tell the story and motivate people to take action when you have just a little image? But when you see when you actually see drone footage, when you actually see the imagery from above, you see, you know, the mother and the calf. It's like, you know, it's just so beautiful. And so when we were able to see those, we're thinking, wow, this is, I can't wait to see the entire film. And every time I watch any part of it, you know, it's like, I get so excited about it, and it's very emotional as well. But, you know, I would say being able to share assets along the way with partners that you trust. And obviously you want to make sure that you sign a non-disclosure agreement if you're starting down the conversation with partners. You know, that felt good for us as well to know, okay, you know what, we're opening up a little bit too, like these are our strategies, and this is how we want to be able to use the film to help support better outcomes for right whales. We're also having conversations about what are our strategies, what are our tactics. And so having that NDA agreement signed in advance helps to have those conversations.
And I would say too, just because you're talking about when you first connected, and for me, when I jumped on, I knew nothing about North Atlantic right whales. Like in December, I knew really, had I heard about the event in 2017? Sure. Did I retain it and think about these whales every day? No. But I was suddenly talking to a group of people who were very invested. It's a very small network of people who are working diligently. And so it was really important that I understood what we were talking about. And people were also really great about sharing knowledge. Nadine and Joanne obviously knew a lot more, but when we were having these conversations, people were throwing out questions that if we didn't do our research before we were presenting, we could have been in trouble. So it's really important, I think, with Nadine bringing the impact campaign team on earlier, because it allowed us to be part of the conversation in a way what we weren't just a bunch of rookies who didn't know anything. Although I was, but I caught up.
Quick learner for sure. I mean, I think one of the really magical things that Pat mentioned too is the fact that Nadine was so in with the scientists and she was able to get what I love to call harrowing and magical moments in the film. And I think that's what people will really take away from it, as well as the take action messages. I mean, we hope people will fall in love with these whales like they do humpbacks, you know, because they are a really, really unique great whale species, and they're on the brink of extinction right now. So, I mean, that's a really important message.
Yeah, Pat, actually, you did speak to some of this just now, but I am curious a little bit more to know, you know, sort of from your end, not having a rough cut to see before you decide to sort of come aboard. Did you have any reservations? I mean, it sounds like from what you were describing of the footage that was being shared and sort of this, you know, non-disclosure agreement, and that allowed for a quite sort of fulsome conversation around the project as it was taking shape. But what was it that really sort of allayed any concerns for you that that this project would be worth jumping on board with?
Yeah, that's a great question, because a lot of NGOs can be skeptical about how something may be portrayed. Are they going to get the messaging right? Are they talking to the right people? You know, there can be a little bit of a level of maybe not, I wouldn't say mistrust, but just caution, right? When you're thinking about, do people really understand the issue here? And it was clear through the conversations that we were having that they understood the issue, and they understood the desire immediately to think about impact. So it was beyond just like, here we've got this beautiful film that we want people to see. It was, we want to do something with this film. So once you knew that that was where, you know, Nadine, Joanne, and Shirley were coming from, it was easier to say yes. You know, yes, why would we not want to take every opportunity we could to be able to, you know, support this impact campaign, and to be able to make sure as many people see this film as possible. And then you know, depending on where they are, whether it's they're on the coast and, you know, they are recreational boaters and they could download an app that would help them, you know, see where right whales are, versus, you know, having someone to write a decision maker and say, please ensure that you're funding, you know, continuing research efforts, disentanglement efforts to protect whales. So for us, it was just, we couldn't not, you know, it seemed like such a great opportunity that if we didn't take advantage of it, you don't normally have an opportunity like this to be able to be a part of an impact campaign for such an incredible documentary. It doesn't happen that often. And so for us, because we'd already done it in the past, we thought, yes, let's say yes. Let's lean in, let's say yes.
Yeah, which is wonderful. And just in my experience of going out and talking to different NGOs, some NGOs get it and some don't. Some NGOs just want to be in the film. And that might be a deciding factor whether they would get involved or not. Some NGOs are producing their own films and videos, which maybe doesn't have the same type of editorial rigor that a film like this does. So you know, Nadine, as a very talented filmmaker, puts story and content first when she tells a story. It's not, oh, this scientist is included because they're part of an organization that's going to support our impact campaign. That was never part of the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have to say, having IFAW come in so early really helped us to bring the other organizations on board, because they've worked with IFAW, they trust IFAW. And that just did wonders for us, because even up until, you know, the very end, we couldn't screen a rough cut for our partners until August. And it wasn't a rough cut, it was pretty much a picture lock. We didn't say that, but we're like, here's the picture lock. But even up until that point, you know, I remember Sean from the Canadian Wildlife Federation was saying to me, I still don't know what this film is going to be about, you know. And it's the only point at which we said, we're having a meeting on this date at this time, and they were all like, yep, we'll be there, because they were all dying to see what this was going to be that they had signed on to and been working on, you know, developing an impact campaign for. So there is a huge amount of trust that has to be built to make these campaigns work.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, when it comes to NGOs working together, I do think we've done many sign-on letters with different NGOs for different issues within Canada. And of course, you look at who are the other players, right? And has so-and-so come on board? So it does matter, right? It absolutely does matter the company you keep. And so for sure, like Nadine and Joanne were approaching the partners that we've worked with or we would have recommended, like, have you spoken to so-and-so? And yes, some NGOs may not be as interested in supporting something that they're not featured in. That wasn't for us necessarily a consideration. We just saw the value of being able to show the imagery, like being able to share via our channels imagery of right whales. We knew was going to be worth it. We knew that.
Before I actually come to Chalet to talk a little bit about some of the particulars of the campaign in terms of the assets that you're creating and how you plan to measure the impact that the campaign will have, I do want to stick with you, Pat, for just a moment to talk about some of the outcomes that you're hoping to see from this collaboration, and then I think we can talk about what sort of specific methods you're pursuing to hopefully achieve those outcomes with Chalet. But Pat, what sort of outcomes are you hoping that the film can have?
Yeah, I think number one is we really want to drive the public awareness of the threats that are facing right whales. And so not only driving public awareness, but having people commit to taking an action. So whether that is signing up to be on an email list, to send an email to their decision makers to say, these are the things that need to continue to happen in order to protect right whales. Downloading an app, like I said, the whale alert app, that if you're on the coast, you can download an app and you can actually see if whales are in the area. So those are things like very discrete actions that we would hope that viewers could take afterwards. And we're thinking about measuring those. So can we see how many people have, signed on to a petition, for example, or how many people have actually taken an action that's been sent to their prime minister? So those are very key actions that we can monitor and say, okay, through this ability to use this impact campaign and the images that we can share, we can compel people to take action.
Awesome. And yeah, Chalet, I'd love to now come to you and maybe talk about some of the particulars of your campaign strategy, some of the assets that you're creating in order to try to reach people in the ways that Pat has just described.
Yeah, sure. So when we started, we wanted to identify who we were targeting. Who is our audience going to be? So there was the documentary film loving audience. We know that that's going to be a pretty impassioned group. So we definitely wanted to create assets that would appeal to them. We wanted to look at the conservationist researchers and scientists that we were working with and also we knew would be interested in this topic. And then we wanted to be a little more general. It's people who love wild animals and maybe they just are whale lovers. So how do you do something for all three people or all three audiences? Can be tricky, but it also is exciting. And we also looked at doing it on multiple platforms. So Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, which I thought is really great because they are also one of our partners who are active on TikTok, but it's often been a neglected platform. And that's where a lot of young people are, and also where we're getting a lot of our sort of wild animal lover audience, which is great. So those are the areas that we focused on. And then we were like, okay, what is each group going to be interested in? And we know that everybody likes factual information. So we've done a lot of that. And this is where our partners, it's maybe not an obvious connection, but when you're building that, we were able to, and we keep, like this week, we were sending out a note verifying information, data that we could kind of find online, but we obviously are not the experts. So I reach out to IFA, I say, look, we're trying to confirm the speed of a North Atlantic right whale. This is what we're hearing. Can you let us know? And within a couple of days, somebody's usually gotten back to us, which is great. So it's a really great partnership that way. And so we're looking at both building an audience, and we've chosen to do it organically. We really aren't paying for boosts or trying to find audience that way. In fact, the only thing we've paid for, we did some ads when we were launching our trailer and launching our world premiere, but otherwise it's organic growth, which has been really exciting to watch. And I think it's important too, sometimes people get hung up on followers, but something like a TikTok, it's not about followers, it's about how many people are viewing your videos. And it doesn't mean they follow you, but you show up in their feed. So we also on our end are learning how to work best in each platform. So is it finding links and articles? Well, we know Twitter audience is probably going to be more interested in reading that. Instagram wants to look at beautiful whale pictures. The other big thing that we've done is you mentioned the infographic. So we love using that and creating it in a visual way that's interesting. And we get a lot of retweets, a lot of sharing. People like to know quick hits of content. So the other favorite thing, I know Joanne and Nadine really like this, we for the whales, so what's interesting about North Atlantic right whales that you don't get with maybe other species is they are highly researched and so highly cataloged. Each whale has a number. And then some of those, every year there's a whale naming opportunity where a handful are given names by via the North Atlantic Right Whale Consortium. So we've been tapping into that in a really fun way and creating kind of like baseball cards for individual whales. And they've got a little bit of a dating app vibe to them too. So you get some, who they are, where you can find them, what their favorite song is. And some of this is just silly, but also some of it is real. Like why is, one of our featured whales is Snow Cone. She's number 3560. Why is she called Snow Cone? Well, on top of her head, one of the callosities, which are these individual markings on each North Atlantic right whale, looks like a snow cone. But you might not know that if you just looked at her and be like, why are you calling her Snow Cone? So we're going to tell you that. And it's a lot of fun. So this month in October, we decided to tap into the ones that have spooky names. So we have one, for example, Casper. So we were like, Casper's best friends. They're going to be other ghosts or magic creatures or whatever it is. But we've tried to have fun with it. And we just see a lot of interaction with that. So it's not always the obvious things, but as long as you can be playful, it doesn't matter the platform, people like it.
We have an opportunity to share some of these. We'll lay them on top of the conversation. Are there any other particular assets that you shared with us that you might want to describe that people will see?
Yeah, video is king or queen, depending on who I'm talking to, but it's absolutely the most important piece in the algorithms. It's all about trying to work within the systems, which change, it feels like weekly, but we know that they like video and that creates engagement. So we sometimes are using pieces from the film directly that kind of tell a bit of the story. Like when we launched on World Oceans Day, what was great about that is we were able to grab a little snippet from the film and give an introduction to some of the participants and one of the whales. So you get to see this beautiful mom-calf pairing, actually Snow Cone, who I talked about. And that allowed our partners to share it, which was key for our growth. So how do we create assets that are interesting to our partners? IFA sharing it on their various platforms. We also did, maybe it's not an obvious connection because it's not a scene from the film. I think people often think it has to be clips from the film. But for Pride Month in June, for example, Nadine had filmed whales, obviously in the ocean, doing different things. And in a few different instances, when they would blow out at the top of their heads, you would also see a rainbow in that. So we thought that would be really fun. And we grabbed it for 7 seconds and we said, Happy Pride. And that got shared and viewed a lot considering we just had launched. So that was a real way for us to introduce to people what we were doing. So it's trying to find ways to take what you have and insert it in the conversation organically so that people think you're interesting enough that they're going to stick around and keep coming back. That's really what we're trying to do.
And on platforms like you've been describing, Instagram, TikTok, and so on, you can see view counts or follower counts, but how else do you go about measuring impact beyond sort of the impressions that some of your material may have? How do you assess how successfully you are sort of moving towards the goals that you've set?
Yeah, engagement's really important for us. We really love seeing, and not just our built-in regulars that we already know, kind of the people who are going to interact. We're seeing new people come in. So here's an example that I loved. We had posted something visually about filming, and somebody posted, oh, I love North Atlantic right whales. When I was a kid, I remember sponsoring one, I think named Gemini. And I immediately, our social media strategist, Emma Bad Aim, saw that. And she, because we have the catalog, was able to look up Gemini and give that person an update on that whale in particular, which, when does that happen? That's not usually an expected interaction, but now we see that person is still interacting with us. You still see that relationship building, and that's going to be important because that person is going to share it with somebody, and then you're going to have more people talking about it, and who knows where that leads to. So for us, it's engagement as much as straight numbers. What can we build?
We'll also be using a survey to measure people's attitudes, whether they change watching the film, that sort of thing. We'll be able to measure certainly, you know, the statistics of how many people see the film on television, how many people see it in movie theaters, that kind of thing. So we'll have all that qualitative and quantitative measurement for the film and the campaign. And I mean, our goal is really to measure the actions that people will take. And so we're working on developing our strategies about getting those measurements right now. And you know, as a case study in impact campaigns, we're really in the early stages of this, Julian. So it'll be great to, you know, maybe talk a year from now, a year and a half from now, and we'll have more tangible results that we can give you.
Yeah, it'd be great. We can maybe do a follow-up
yeah,
next year. I'm mindful of our time, and maybe I can just, as we draw to a close, invite each of you to touch on an aspect of this process that either we haven't spoken about yet, or something that you'd like to emphasize, whether that again is to do with how you funded the campaign or brought partners in, or some of the specific strategies that you're pursuing around industry or government stakeholders. I'd love to just give each of you maybe a last word. So Nadine, I'll come to you first.
I would say my parting thought would be, you know, I've done 3 of these. I've done it with a budget that was 25,000 USD. And this budget, we've managed to raise close to 250,000 Canadian. Big difference. You can still do a campaign with a small budget. You just have to approach it differently. So I don't want to discourage anybody from doing this. I think you can do it. You just have to find the right partner. So with that 25,000, what I did, it was a film that I did called 15 to Life, Kenneth's story, which is about banning juvenile life without parole sentences in the United States. I found a partner, the Campaign for the Fair Sentencing of Youth, which had just been created specifically for this goal. And they had partners around the country in the United States, all local partners working on justice reform. So in that one partner, I had assembled my entire partner team. And then it aired on PBS, POV, and they have a great community screenings program. So with that and this group, and I just gave my $25,000 to them, and I worked with their legislative advocate, and we had screenings around the country and managed to influence. And it was also very targeted. We were going after decision makers. We were going after elected officials who were responsible for changing sentencing law. And so with that approach, it was very successful and impactful. So you can do it with a small budget. There are, you know, we're hoping, you know, to get to a place in Canada. We didn't get into the whole fiscal sponsorship thing and how you structure these deals so that you can get money, but there are a number of ways to do it that you can raise a budget to support this kind of work in Canada. We did have a US fiscal sponsor, the Redford Center. We raised money, as Joanne said, through virtual events, you know, and those were donations that went through a fiscal sponsor in the US, and we did find a sponsor here in Canada, and then sometimes it's been contract for service. So it's a whole mishmash of ways of getting money, but don't think you have to raise. I know you hear about these, some of the impact campaigns in the States, the budgets are $1 million, you know, and that's great if you can get it, but you don't have to have it to have an impact.
Thanks, Nadine. I'm glad you were able to touch on that, actually. I think that's something that will be of particular interest to, you know, Canadian filmmakers who are trying to embark on work like this, and knowing that, you know, you've been able to see real results with fewer resources is great. And then also just having some insight into your fundraising approach here, I think is also really really helpful. Julian, I'll come to you next.
Yeah, I'd like to say that along the way, as you're researching and trying to build partnerships, you'll also run into people and organizations that don't have money, but that are really keen to help you. And like we had like fantastic advice from the New England Aquarium. As we were putting this together, we had 2 experts there, one on seafood sustainability, another one that was a right whale expert that was involved in helping us craft some of the campaign actions and our goals. And then also one of the foundations that we worked with is very active in this space too. And, you know, they didn't become an official partner, but they were very generous with their time and expertise. And I think that that is really, really valuable too, as you're building your relationships.
Great. Shirley?
Yeah, just to build on that, creative partnerships, we didn't touch on, we're also working and talking to the ROM about the fact that they have a great whales exhibit, and one of the whales that they're focused on is the North Atlantic right whale. So it's an obvious fit, but it still takes work and conversations and seeing how we can excite their member base and their the people that are involved with them to come and see our film, and how people watching our film can then go learn more about whales at the ROM. One of the participants, for example, in the film, he's got a new book that's coming out in a few weeks, Michael J. Moore. It's called We Are All Whalers. And we're talking to his publisher about how can our film be front and center. He's in the film, use it as another way to leverage. So getting creative with additional partnerships is also something that we've been looking at, which again, just expands that audience base for us and the potential partners that we can work with. So we're doing some of that. I would say, you know, do your research, create a strategy, and then be willing to be really flexible, because you'll learn as you go and grow, that you'll find new ways and opportunities to do with that. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't invite everyone to follow us on our social platforms at Last Right Whales on Twitter, Insta, and TikTok, and then on Facebook at Hit Play Productions, and on YouTube at Hit Play Productions. So please follow us and watch what we're doing.
Great advice. And finally, I'll come to you.
I think that just parting thoughts are also make sure that you buy a ticket and screen the film at this film festival. And for those filmmakers who are reaching out to NGOs, just be open to having multiple conversations, but just do your research and just, you know, remember that what you're bringing is the expertise on the visual and the storytelling. And that's what a lot of NGOs are also looking to do, right? The only way that we can actually impact people is through our stories that we tell and the visuals that we share. So NGOs are also very interested in being able to partner and say, okay, how can we help support one another? So I'd say, reach out, don't be afraid. And if you know, someone isn't interested right now, it doesn't mean they won't be. Just ask them, like, who else do you recommend that I could speak to? If it's not you or not now, is there another NGO working in the space that you think might be better off, you know, partnering for an impact campaign? So have the conversations. It does, you know, it does take a bit of time, but remember what you're bringing as a filmmaker is like the visuals and the narrative and the stories. And that's what we all need, is just to hear those stories.
Awesome. Well, that's a great note on which to leave it. I'd like to say a big thanks again to each of you for your participation here, for offering insights into this collaboration, all of the innovative approaches you've taken. We really do appreciate it. And of course, to anybody watching again within Ontario, remember that you can tune in this, well, not this Sunday, but Sunday, the 24th of October at 7 p.m. for our closing night live stream. And if you're not in Ontario, the film is coming to you no matter where you are in Canada, both in a theatrical release and then ultimately on CBC. So it's something that you will definitely be able to see, and we're very excited for you to see it. So with that, just once more, thanks so much again to each of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And enjoy the rest of your Planet in Focus Festival if you're able to tune into some of our programming in addition to our industry videos. So thanks again.
Thank you.